What I would like to ask you to kind of encapsulate, you can either do two things. One, complete the sentence, Italian wine podcast matters because, or to me, Italian wine podcast is.
The Italian Wine Podcast is like a unique glass of wine for your ears with every episode. And that's what makes it special. It's like tasting a new glass of something at every turn, and each episode offers a little soundbite of something new for your ears, which I love.
Oh, I love that too. What follows is a special episode, 2,500 Voices of Italian Wine, which is a celebratory roundtable bringing back past and present hosts to reflect on what Italian Wine podcast has meant to them and to the global wine community. This episode blends storytelling, nostalgia, and behind-the-scenes anecdotes with insights about how the world of Italian wine and podcasting itself has evolved since the show began.
But Stevie, guess what? We've got a surprise for you. A message from the person who studied all with you back in late 2017.
Good morning or afternoon or evening or whatever. And hello to Stevie and to the Italian Wine Podcast team. Congrats on episode 2500. That's incredible. So well done. I should also say this is Julia, and my claim to fame is that I am the very first producer of the Italian Wine Podcast back in 2017, when there was only one producer, me, and one host, the one and only Monty Waldin. Hi, Monty. I know now that the show has grown exponentially. Well done, Stevie, to all those involved. And of course, well done to all the producers of the show who have edited so many hours in all those episodes over the years. In this very short recording, I will tell you a little bit about the first couple of seasons. Why not? And I was asked to mention 3 favorite episodes, so I'll bring you back in time in 2017-18, I think. I have fond memories, for example, of recording episode 119 with Carol Bouquet of the Sangue d'Oro in Pantelleria at the Gran Guardia in Verona. We recorded that during Opera Wine that year, and we were recording in the smallest possible podcast booth in the venue. And Carol Bouquet spoke about her passion for Italian wine and the beautiful island of Pantelleria. She was very down to earth despite her status in the film industry. But most importantly, she offered me and my social media manager a glass of passito, which was very kind and unexpected, especially during a busy event. And producers have to drink sometimes while they're working just to keep themselves going for a little bit. And then I also remember Jose Raldo of the Donna Fugata winery in Sicily in episode 176, who sang at the end of the show. That was completely unexpected but delightful. And believe it or not, I didn't really have to edit it very much. And then I guess the third episode, I'm more of a book geek, not really a wine geek, but I really learned a lot about orange wine that I didn't know very much about from the episode with Mattea Grafner of the Grafner Winery, which is episode 85. And then I enjoyed recording silly things such as the celebratory or anniversary episodes we used to upload every now and then. Arthur Waldin, Monty Waldin's son, for example, interviewing his father. That was really cute and funny. And then we did episodes with bloopers, Monty's bloopers. And I also have fond memories of recording episodes on site. I know that you're doing that quite a lot now, but for us, it was, I guess, we were at the beginning of it. And I remember an amazing trip in the Bolgheri region in Tuscany, also with Professor Attilio Scienza. So that was great fun. So once again, well done for making it to episode 2500. And as I used to say, obviously I have to end my short tribute with this. Cin cin with Italian wine people. Ciao a tutti.
Hello, everybody. My name's Stevie Kim. Welcome to a very special episode of the Italian Wine Podcast. We've just reached 2,500 episodes. And this is the 2,500th episode. And if you've been with us for a while, you already know we've never been about perfection. I've been talking about that a lot lately, about imperfection, how our Italian Wine podcast is not perfect. All in all, we've never been about perfection, but that's kind of the point, right? So Italian Wine podcast has always been about real conversations, often unpolished, honest, and very transparent. Because I personally believe imperfection in its own way is sort of an art form. So today we're celebrating that spirit, the people. Steve Raye is already laughing, the stories, and a little bit of beautiful chaos that got us here. Here's to the 2,500 voices of Italian wine, perfectly imperfect, with my guest today. Ciao ragazzi.
Ciao.
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 So what we're going to do is ask you just a few questions. Okay, let's start with the OG, Steve Raye. How are you, Steve? Where are you?
Thank you for that. I'm in my home office in Simsbury, Connecticut, where we just had a nor'easter, a big storm with a lot of rain and a lot of wind.
How did you get involved with the Italian Wine Podcast? For those who are less familiar.
Yeah, I think this is probably everybody who is involved in this, it recognizes the story is because you told me to. Joy's laughing.
Like
There was the pretense of an ask at one point in time, but beyond that, it was a tell. Like a long time ago, actually, was in 2018. You and I worked on a book called "How to Get U.S. Market Ready," and after that was done, you were looking for ways to leverage and reuse content, and decided it'd be a good idea to do an audio version of the book, and it ended up being the first round of the podcast for me. And so we did, we recorded that. And the reason why I did it is because you told me to. So I did.
Okay, excellent. Very honest answer there. I've asked Beatrice to pull some stats. How many episodes did Steve record?
130, 103 only for the book.
Yeah, so quite a bit. That's 2 years to continue, because you did it as a weekly show.
Yeah.
U.S. Market Get Ready. So what's kind of the funniest or most unexpected recording experience?
It wasn't necessarily the recording experience, but when I would mention to people that I'm doing the podcast, they say, yeah, I listen to you, regularly or all the time, which surprises me that it got that much traction. And that part was great. I remember once I was in Italy on a trip, and we were having dinner at somebody's house in a winery in Tuscany, it must have been. And we were sitting around kind of like the main table with the owner of the winery. And there were about 12 of us at the table. And everybody is introducing themselves and telling a short story of who they were. They got to me, and the owner says, "Oh, Professor Raye, you don't need an introduction. Everybody knows who you are," which kind of surprised the heck out of me. And before we started doing this, through some other contacts you put me in contact with, I had been doing an annual lecture at the University of Bologna, the business school. And he was familiar with that, and also familiar with, but that was very pleasant to hear that, oh, okay. So I kind of fit here. That was very nice.
So if you could do a redo, right, of any of the interviews, you have to choose one. Which would it be and why?
Well, I would say I'll give you one answer, and that's all of them. One of the things I did that I think in hindsight I could have done better was I prepared way too much. What I did was I would have a conversation with the person I'm interviewing, to pre-interview, if you will, just to kind of get a sense of what we're talking about. And what I had found was what we got out of them the first time, which was not recorded, was really good stuff. And then when I asked them questions, hoping to get, those answers repeated and played back, didn't work that well. So I think you got to go into it cold. I would do it differently now. The idea of being well prepared, to your point earlier in this conversation.
Yeah, I think you drove Joy crazy with that, right, Joy?
I tried to, but I don't think I
You can tell us like
succeeded.
this. You are no longer part of the podcast team. So
No, I honestly, Steve, I think you and I only ever had trouble when our tech wasn't working. I think
Right.
the rest was good stuff, I think.
Well, I knew, I would break in and I would explain things that I wanted the other person to say, and they wouldn't do it. And it's like when I watched the nightly news, David Muir would say something, and then the person he's interviewing would say, yeah. But what he really wanted was to get them to say it in their own words, in their pacing and so on and so forth. But my erstwhile partner used to say he liked things done, not perfect, to the point you introduced in this thing. And in hindsight, I think he's right. I was always going towards perfection, thinking I knew the answer, but getting it done and moving on is often a good thing too.
So Joy, like when you were the producer, you did every single episode yourself. Now it's a little bit organized differently, right?
I'm sure you guys have more going on now. So, yeah.
So what was kind of the funniest or most unexpected recording experience for you as a producer?
Honestly, it was the ones that were not planned. So, again, I'm going to repeat what Steve just said. It's like, how did you get involved? It's because you basically came up to me one day and said, this is what you're going to do now. So, that happened a lot over the 5 years. So, like, it's all a blur, to be honest. Like we did I think 10 episodes a week at one point for the last couple years or year and a half. I can't remember. But the ones that stick out, like, for example, it was during Wine to Wine, I think it was. And Robert Joseph was a judge. And you came up to me, and I had never done an interview before, ever. I was always behind and you said to me, Joy, you're going to do an interview. And I was like, sure. And I said, who is it with? And you said, it's with Robert Joseph. I'm like, who's Robert Joseph? And in my head, I'm like, the only wine person I could think of at the time was Robert Parker. And I was like, okay, let's do this. So I get in there and I'm like, good afternoon, blah, blah, blah. We're with Robert Parker. And Robert Joseph then completely went off, and I'll never forget it. It was hilarious because I thought he was somebody else and he thought it was hilarious, and it ended up being really funny because it was a total disaster, but it was actually a really good interview in the end because of that. So that's the one that sticks out the most.
But you've interviewed others, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie. My interview skills, they've always been kind of subpar. So, I mean, I did a few clubhouses, and then I interviewed this guy who got really mad at me during the interview, which I'm not even going to mention his name, but it was.
He's really, really famous.
I know, he was not happy with me at all. And that was bad. And, there was a few others.
Joy, name and shame.
It's okay. It was my fault. Well, actually, you know what? I'm not taking total blame for that one, but it was because I had no idea. It was, anyway, I'm not even going to mention it. It's in the past. But yeah, no, there's been a lot of good episodes, especially, the ones I liked a lot. Monty's biodynamic ones. Those were always interesting.
He was reading the book.
Well, and also when he would interview wineries that were doing biodynamic things, like putting poop in the horns and burying them and stuff like that. I always thought that was hilarious, and I loved it. I thought that was great. And also he was knowledgeable. And of course, I enjoyed, obviously, Steve's. Steve, you were amazing all the time. You were always great. The only time I ever wanted to kill you was when you would get to the very end of the interview and then say
move things around.
Yeah, Joy, go back to when I said this, and then cut this and move it to the third time I said this. And or Food and Wine with Marc Millon.
Yes, Marc Millon. He's still around.
I know, I love him. He's great. He also does some amazing episodes, like the black garlic episode, or there's so many episodes where he literally he's great with the food and the wine pairings, and he does a lot of. He did an episode for. You know what? I think we should move on because I'm going to keep going. There are so many episodes.
Keep digging that hole.
Yeah. There's 1,400 episodes to choose from, so I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, but that Robert Parker sticks out, huh?
Yeah, that was bad, but it was funny. It was funny.
All right. So Joy was, of course, I consider Steve Raye, Joy Livingston, our OG of the Italian Wine podcast. And moving on to Richard Hough. Richard, you're kind of the new kid on the block. What are you up to? For those who are less familiar, tell them what you do.
Hi, Stevie. Yeah, thanks. New Kid on the Block. Indeed, we launched the book club on the 20th of March, 2024, and we've just published our 20th episode with the effortlessly charming Sonny Hodge. I heard recently that if the podcast makes it to 20 episodes, you're in the top 1% of podcasts. So the fact that we've made it to 20 is fantastic. Starting back in March 2024 with Marc Millon. He was our first guest, and he was a brilliant first guest. Mark's always been an inspiration, both as a writer and a podcast host. So it was great to have someone like him kick things off. And then it's like a who's who, really, of wine writers. We've been really lucky with some of the guests we've had on: Andrew Jefford, David Way, Hermione Ireland, Kelly White, Steve Hoffman, Robert Joseph, Paul Balk, Kevin Day, Jessica Dupuy, Mike Modell was fantastic. He was telling us the history of the Philadelphia sandwich. I can highly recommend that episode, but not before lunch. It'll guarantee to make you feel hungry. Tamlin Curran was great as well. She did her best wine books of 2024. So she was a really fun guest to interview. You, of course, Stevie, have been on the show talking about your life as a publisher. Paul Balk was one of the other guys who had a really interesting perspective, a really interesting wine history, wine story coming from the Netherlands. Really taken in by his story as a musician as well, not just a wine writer.
If you could do a redo, right, of any of the interviews, which would it be and why?
The episodes I would love to do again was an episode with David Way. He was a fantastic guest, but we recorded it on the last day of Vinitaly in the afternoon in the tiny little podcast booth at the back of the Italian Wine podcast offices here. So they were disassembling Vinitaly while we were recording, and there were all sorts of announcements and alarms and disruptions out the back there in the pavilion. So that was a bit of a disaster from a technical point of view. But David was a great guest, and his book on Piedmonte is really worth a read if anyone's wanting to do a deep dive into that region. So yeah, some really fantastic guests, plenty more in the pipeline. Probably my dream guest, I guess, would be, I'm going to go with Francis Ford Coppola. He's got a winery in California, and obviously also the director of the Godfather trilogy. So if you can pull a few strings there, and let's see if we can get Francis Ford Coppola on the show sometime soon.
All right. So Monty.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm all right.
We were just talking about you.
Yeah, it's not really worth it. I'm very boring.
So, Monty, we are celebrating, believe it or not, 2,500 episode. And it all started with Monty Waldin. Do you remember your first episode? It was with Elizabeth.
From Altesina.
Yes. And how, were you prepared? Were you nervous?
I had a little bit of nervousy, but I was lucky. It was just in a small booth, basically, so I felt protected. And after about 3 minutes, I thought this is going to be great because it's easy. I'm fascinated about people, and as a journalist, I meet lots of people, and you have to ask loads of questions. And after a while, it becomes much easier, and we did very well, I think.
Yeah, I think you did more than 200 episodes.
200?
Yeah, crazy, right?
Yeah, that's a lot of numbers, yeah.
Do you remember anyone in particular, kind of like what sticks to you, like your funniest or most unexpected recording experience?
It is quite hard to pick one out, to be honest. Over time, we had very interesting people. The key thing, I think, is wine can be very difficult sometimes. My job, I think, was to make sure that the wines that I was describing, I made it so that everybody could understand, and it worked out.
Well, that's a fundamental question these days because, the trade press and there's a lot of common journalistic coverage about how the whole wine and spirits industry is declining worldwide, particularly in the United States, with newer generations and changing mores and changing interests, lower alcohol tariffs and all that kind of stuff. So what used to be very interesting to an older generation, if I can use that term, had very little interest to an emerging younger generation.
I was talking with other people in the wine sector, and I think all of us at the moment, as you said, are all a little bit worried about what is wine going to be in a few years? Will it survive? And it would just be awful if we ignored that and left it go, because it would be a big disaster.
So Monty, I mean, you are known, I guess most popular pods were about biodynamics, clearly, right? That's you're kind of the, Mr. Biodynamics.
Yeah, but not a fundamentalist. That's really important for me.
Right. So what is the evolution of biodynamics since like few years back? How do you see it evolving?
It creeps up. My way of doing things was to go biodynamic, and it's been very popular, not just in high-end wineries.
So if you were to tell our current audience about biodynamics, what are the things that they should know?
One thing is what you did with your vineyard. You make sure that you have deep roots in your vineyard, and you think, what's the point of that? The thing for that is because if you have deep roots in your vines, you get much stronger wines because they can get the nutrients that they want.
Okay, now over to you, Juliana.
Hi, everyone. It's Juliana Colangelo. I am one of the hosts of Masterclass US Wine Market on the Italian Wine Podcast. So to reflect on 2,500 episodes, what a milestone. Can't believe it. But then again, I can, because Stevie is constantly working and never off. A few thoughts of mine on the Italian Wine Podcast. I joined in March of 2023. So we'll have 3 years coming up in March, which can't believe it. Stevie asked me to take over the podcast from Steve Raye, and it was a little intimidating, to be honest, because he's such a figurehead in the industry for so many years. So at first I felt a little underqualified to take on the role of his podcast, but he was as gracious as could be in giving me tips and advice and his thoughts on the podcast and things we could do differently and improve on it, as well as things that were working. So it was a rather smooth transition, thanks to Steve. And thank you, Steve, for that and for all your support.
What about you? What's your funniest or most unexpected recording experience or memory?
Some of my favorite memories from the podcast and favorite guests, I really like when our guests are authentic and real about other parts of their life as well. I keep my interviews pretty focused on business topics and B2B topics, but I also really like to weave in or tie in personal experiences. For instance, I loved speaking to Bobby Stuckey, master sommelier based out of Colorado, who owns several restaurants and is importing wines from Friuli now, but he's also a marathon runner. So that was a really cool episode because we dove into the crossovers of the discipline it takes to run a marathon and the discipline it takes to become a master sommelier. So I really liked that episode because of the authenticity of his story and learning about, his experience and what's behind it. I also like people who aren't afraid to make some bold claims and statements. Dan Petrossi comes to mind. I interviewed him early on in the podcast, and he's always really fun to talk to because he's not afraid to say bold things about the industry, call the industry out, call himself out. So he's always a ton of fun. And Karen McNeil was incredible as well. I saw Karen last week at Benelli Chicago, and she's just always inspiring and real and authentic, and hearing her story on the podcast of how she came into the world of wine and what it was like to be a woman in the 1980s in New York City in wine tasting groups. It was just a fascinating and illuminating story, and shed also a lot of light on the ways our industry's really evolved over the last decades.
Juliana, how do you think Italian wine communication has changed since the podcast began?
For starters, I think as we see the next generation of leaders in Italian wineries, very often, in around my age in their 30s and 40s, taking on more leadership roles, I think you're seeing some really great social media content that's, again, really personal and like kind of a peek behind the scenes at people's real lives. There's an account for your man, the son that is kind of the face of your man, and he's always like running and doing like these great drone videos and action shots like that are just so much fun to watch. I love following him on Instagram, and I just did an interview last week with Giovanna from Agricola Brandini, and she's got a great Instagram account as well that shows the story of Brandini, but also her own story. So I'm loving to see these kind of more personalized approaches to social media, which I think is such a critical part. And, I'm thinking about Instagram specifically here, but such a critical part of any wide communication strategy.
Now over to you, Jessica Dupuy, a true Texan and our Texan specialist. So Jessica, what is one of your favorite interview over the past, year or so?
Some of my favorite interviews in both of the years were with James Tidwell, who is the co-founder and kind of overall director of Texom and the Texom Wine Awards. And, James is a real interesting character. He's always in the background for the conference, and you often see him, making sure things are running smoothly. But in all honesty, you don't ever really get to see him on stage or speaking in front of people. So getting to sit down with him for the podcast and actually having a chance to get him to talk a little bit about kind of what goes on in his mind, how the organization and logistics management goes behind the conference. I just really enjoy James, and I feel like it's really great to be able to share him and who he is with the rest of the audience. I also found it really fun interviewing people that I'd met before, but hadn't really ever had a chance to get to know. So for me, it turned into kind of a social event, and that I'd, known people like Mariam Ahmed and Amanda McCrossan for a long time in the distance, but getting to do the podcast with them and interview them gave me a chance to get to know them more personally. So I think that's probably been some of my favorite aspects of doing the podcast. And I'm grateful for the opportunity and look forward to doing more.
So, Mr. Marc Millon, how are you?
I'm excited to see all the other podcasters because we all work on our own in our own spaces, speaking to people that we generally don't see. But it's such a great thing to be doing. And I really enjoy every week speaking to people that some I know very well, and some I haven't met. I haven't even tasted their wines. But I think it's a human contact that connects Italian wine with us, and listening to people's voices, listening to why they're doing things, where they're living, what they're eating, what there is around them, whether it's raining or beautiful sunny day. And, we have this connection. We're taken into other people's worlds. And I think that's what I think is very special about the Italian Wine Podcast, and also why I enjoy doing it, why I'm now on 215 episodes, I think.
Yes, my goodness. But you did 215 episodes. But the question that I've been asking all the different hosts is, how did you first get involved with Italian Wine Podcast? Because you have a special story.
Well, my story starts with Margherita and with Cynthia, because it was, I think it was in the summer of 2021 or 2020, maybe. It was when the Giro d'Italia was delayed from its normal spring start. And at the same time, I was in a Italian Wine Academy study group, the WhatsApp list. And I wanted to post every morning that the race was on, about where the race was and what wines were from each area, because the Giro d'Italia is so wonderful because it goes to all the different regions. There's a wine stage. And that was very exciting because, do you remember, Stevie, the Giro d'Italia that year even finished right in front of the arena at Verona, and you were there live for that. We did a live podcast. Margherita, you were there, and it was really quite amazing. I had never podcasted before. I'd never really even listen to podcasts. So out of that,
Yeah, you didn't even know what a podcast was.
I didn't really know. No, and it was even worse than that because it wasn't just a podcast; it was Clubhouse, which was
Yes, it was worse.
I still haven't got myself around Clubhouse.
Yeah, you're still traumatized for
I am. That's
yourself
right.
on Clubhouse.
Yeah. I try to be anonymous when I go on that.
So a lot of firsts, right? So
Yeah, that's right.
yeah, Margherita, you're going from being a producer now to a podcast host. Do you remember how you got started?
Yeah, I do remember. I remember at the time Jacob was the producer, and I just really wanted to make the jingles for the Italian Wine podcast. So I remember, without asking you, Stevie, he promoted me to director of music of the Italian Wine podcast. And so, yeah, I started out just producing some of the music, some of the jingles, and then eventually I started producing episodes.
And which role do you enjoy more, being a producer or a podcast host?
I really do like working with audio, but I also love just the freedom of just having a conversation and then, not caring about what comes after that, because that's a lot of work.
Yeah, you see, actually, I should have thought of this before. Marc Millon and Cynthia Chaplin, they both have a glass of wine. They're the absolute pros in everything that they do with wine. And Cynthia, how did you first get involved with Italian Wine Podcast?
Same. So I was like the first Clubhouse person when I first came to be with you, Stevie, in Verona, like in the summer of 2021. And then you gave me voices in November. So I'm coming up the same thing as Marc on my 4th anniversary, which seems incredible. 200 episodes of doing the podcast, of sort of talking to people. Like, I'm so lucky compared to the rest of you. I don't have to talk about wine. Like, I talk about people who are doing weird and wacky and interesting stuff in the wine industry and being diverse and being inclusive. So you gave me that, and I thought, oh my God, same as Marc. I had listened to lots of podcasts, but I had never done one. And it was just amazing to start talking to people about diversity in wine. I've learned so much in 4 years. I have talked to so many outrageous and incredible and intelligent and amazing people. It's been, a wild and wacky, incredible ride.
So, you said wacky, but what's your funniest or most unexpected recording experience?
Oh, God. Okay. All right. So, funniest and most unexpected, but also one of the coolest was a woman called, well, there were two. A woman called Beth Brickenden, who's in the UK, and she does wine and drag. So she gets drag queens and she does these wine events with drag queens, totally inclusive, this amazing thing. She got found at the Edinburgh Festival in the summer, and she's WSET diploma holder, but she does wine and drag. So very interesting. And then more recently, another woman in the US who is working on making bars be a safe space. And she is a tractor puller. Like, she pulls tractors with her bare hands when she's not making bars be a safe space. So I've had this amazing opportunity to talk to very, very interesting and different people. My conversations aren't always about actual wine, but much more about what people are doing in the wine industry, in sort of underrepresented communities, and all sorts of things that have opened up a whole world to me. I've become a really dyed-in-the-wool person, very set on diversity in wine because of it.
And Marc, what about your episodes? Do you have any guests who completely surprised you in a good or a bad way?
Well, nothing quite as unusual as Cynthia's, perhaps. I think I've just always been, it's been so interesting to hear really inspiring stories. One was a guy I just went out and saw last week, a 32-year-old guy named Luca Ciottoli, whose father's a fisherman in the Cinque Terre. And he went away from the land. He didn't ever expect to come back and work the vineyard that his grandfather had, but he actually got a PhD in digital marketing. And he came back and he began to restore the dry stone walls. And it's a crazy task because you have to get a helicopter to drop the stones. The helicopter costs 300 euros a minute. And he's doing this incredibly hard physical labor to make 3,000 bottles of wine, which sell mainly in the father had a dream, the fisherman father had a dream that he'd have a restaurant on iti-turismo, the maritime equivalent of agriturismo. So fishermen have iti-turismo, and they have a restaurant, and he wanted to serve his own fish that he had caught with his own wine. And the family are now doing that together. And it was really inspired me to go out to Cinque Terre, and I've actually going to be recording some more pods with people I met who are doing some remarkable things out there.
That's fantastic. And Barbara Fitzgerald, you are one of 2 pods of the U.S. Masterclass for the U.S. market, which you've inherited with Steve Raye, from Steve Raye. And do you remember your first episode? Like how nervous or unprepared you were?
I do. So I'll say that, wing it is not in my vocabulary. So I came in extremely prepared, maybe over prepared even, but I wasn't really that nervous. I like this medium because it's really just a one-on-one conversation. So the stakes don't feel that high. You just get to talk to one person about the things that you're already grappling with in your day-to-day work. So my first guest was Ben Salisbury, who, does a bunch of YouTube recordings, and he's such a pro and so comfortable behind the mic that I really immediately felt at ease.
So tell us, for those who are less familiar, how you divide the episodes between you and Juliana for the U.S. Masterclass.
Well, I don't want to I'll let you into how the sausage was made, but we don't necessarily, have a developed strategy on how we're splitting these up. When some relevant issues come up, we'll always coordinate with each other and say okay, I think we need to talk about this. And it's kind of all right, for example, the tariffs came up. So, Juliana did an episode on that right away. And so then the next time, something else really pressing came up, I did the episode. I think we both feel pretty comfortable with all of the relevant topics in the business world today, but also we're a good team. I love collaborating with Juliana.
Yeah, initially it was more like you do the West Coast and she does the East Coast thing, right?
Yeah. But we're both everywhere. We both have our feet in all all geographic locations. So
all right. So I'm going to go to the young ones now. McKenna and Margherita, they are both part of this next generation. So McKenna, tell us what you're doing.
Yes. Good to be with you all today. So I record the podcast from Chicago, and I interview Italian wine producers and people involved in the Italian wine scene who are under 35 years old. Everyone from
I thought it was under 30.
Well, yeah, I kind of stretched it up to 35. But because you're right, it's under 30 officially.
Right. But it was 30 under 30. But
you're right.
Okay.
We have a lot of good people at 31 years old. Regardless, yes. So I interview them. We make it quick and fun, so they're about 25 minutes. And we always include some cool rapid fire questions towards the end. So you don't only get a historical context for the work they're about, but then also you get to know their personality. And I've also been able to interview several influencers like Pilar Brito, and I have Marie Cheslett coming up next week. So that's been a cool additional dynamic.
And you, Margherita?
I try to interview people and put the focus back on not wine per se, but how it has always been a vessel for other things. And so I check out what people are doing now with wine, involving wine, reading tarot cards, or just making wine from plums. And yes, we still call it wine, kind of breaking the rules and make it more conversational and just fun.
So give us a little bit of a sample of who you've interviewed so far and who you are planning to interview.
Well, so far, I've really had fun interviewing this wine bar that has, as a neighbor, a vintage shop, and customers. It didn't start like that, but now customers they stop at at the wine bar and then go, thrift shopping with the glass in their hand. And it's just to make the experience a little bit more complete. I believe, new generations are very prone to ADHD. We want to do like so many things at once. And I believe this is just the perfect example. And with that, I am about to interview this girl that wants to create a community tasting where people from all communities just meet once a month and taste wines. They learn a little bit more about wine, but it's just more a way to get together, to create a community and just to find a safe space with people. Knowing people, sometimes it's easy to feel lonely. Again, new generations and new challenges. So I love seeing that wine is becoming just going back to being what it is. Like, it's not about the wine. It's what you do while you have a glass of wine. And I love that.
If you could hand the mic to anyone in the wine world, who would it be?
I think I'm going to go back in history. I'm going to go to Pliny the Elder, who was maybe the first wine writer. Way back, who perished in AD 79 when Vesuvius blew its top because he was so curious. And I think that he was watching Vesuvius erupting from where he was in charge of the Roman fleet in the Campi Flegrei. And I imagine he was probably watching with a glass of wine in hand, glass of wine from the Campi Flegrei. And he actually was so curious, but also horrified, that he mobilized the Roman Navy, and they sailed across the Bay of Naples to try to help people and also to get a closer view. And it was there that this great naturalist who wrote some wonderful books, he is considered one of the earliest wine writers. And so I think he would be pretty cool to share a glass of wine with, probably Falernum.
I'm kind of with Marc on this one. I'm going back a little bit in history. So sticking with my voices theme, I'd really like to talk to Juliette Colbert. So she was the French woman who came into Barolo and told all the Barolo guys that they were doing everything wrong, brought in French oak and told them how to make their Barolo better. Lots of streets are named after her. Everything in Barolo relates to the Marchesa of Barolo, Juliette. I'd love to talk to her about, she was pretty much a sold bride. She was the daughter of a French diplomat, got sent off to Piemonte to marry the Marchese of Barolo. And she revamped everything. She changed the face of Barolo at a time when women weren't doing anything. So I'd love to hear the inside secrets. I'd like to sit in her boudoir with a glass of Barolo and talk to her about that.
Sounds great. And Margherita, I know you're going to say Madonna.
Yeah, I only have one goal, actually, since I started the Italian Wine Podcast, and I've been trying probably since 2019. I want to get Madonna on the podcast, and I will eventually do it. But I would love also to talk to JC and ask him how he turned water into wine. And with JC, I'm talking about Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ.
Oh, I was like Sean Shaw.
How is
I
that?
would actually like that too, Margherita.
Yeah, tell
we
me.
should collaborate.
Let's do that.
All right. Okay.
I actually want to shout out my upcoming interview, which I'm really excited about. It's with Luca and Matteo Guarini, and I got to try their wines last week at Vinitaly, and they're making Pinot Noir in Umbria. They've just taken over their father's business, and they're like 22 years old. One of them lives in California, one of them lives in Rome and Umbria. And frankly, like their energy and the taste of the wines, like this was the cutting edge of the next generation, and I'm really excited about it.
Oh, she's so geeky. She's such a nerd. I love it.
Nerd out.
Okay. And Barbara, what about you?
Who would I interview? Well, I guess I have to answer in line with my show and with my California roots in mind. I would have to say Robert Mondavi, who really is kind of the scion for the California wine industry and why our model from a business perspective works so well here in California. So I would love to be able to talk. I reference him constantly. His philosophy was a rising tide lifts all ships, talking about how when we as an industry work together, we go farther. And so I feel like that's really relevant in these days with all the challenges that we're facing. So I'd love to talk to him.
So I think we're going to come to a close. But what I would like to ask you to kind of encapsulate, you can either do two things. One, complete the sentence, Italian Wine Podcast matters because, or to me, Italian Wine Podcast is either one.
Italian Wine Podcast matters because nobody does what we do. We are brave and we take risks and we make mistakes and we talk to everyone. We don't care who they are, and we make space for everyone. And I think that's really important.
Italian Wine Podcast matters because it gives a voice to the people shaping the future of wine, from vineyard pioneers and Marc Show to young innovators with McKenna and Margherita and global thinkers with myself and Juliana. It's where people come together to share the ideas that move wine forward and remind us that this industry doesn't stand still, and neither does the people who care about it most.
Italian Wine Podcast matters because it's a community. It feels like a family. And we do cover things that are actually happening in the world and not just in the wine industry. And this should be reminded more often. And we have fun.
Well, the Italian Wine Podcast is amazing because every single day of the week, the world of Italian wine is brought into homes all around the world, and the world of Italian wine in so many different ways, from all of the different shows hosted here today, which each have a different voice and a different point of view and a different angle into the world of Italian wine. So it's unique. No other podcast does this.
The Italian Wine Podcast is like a unique glass of wine for your ears with every episode. And that's what makes it special. It's like tasting a new glass of something at every turn, and each episode offers a little soundbite of something new for your ears, which I love.
Oh, I love that too. So before we close, are there any things you would like to say before we close? Any of you?
So happy to be on the Italian Wine Podcast team. It's such a nice way to think about the industry from unique lenses, talk to interesting people about wine, which I love and is such a huge part of my life. And I love the community that Stevie's built around Italian wine. And I think the podcast and our network plays a big role in that. So thank you, Stevie. Thank you to all our listeners. And cheers to 2,500 more episodes.
I'd like to say thank you to Stevie for rallying us all and helping us charge forward. I think we're all excited for the coming year, and I know that if we work as a team, it'll succeed. So looking forward to it.
Well, thank you for all of your contribution. We can't do this by ourselves. Clearly, it's very much community generated.
Absolutely.
Community generated, led by a fearless leader. So thank you, Stevie. And also the whole production team, Beatrice, Roza. I just talk to people. I get to have the conversations I'm already having and record it. And you guys are really doing the legwork. So
absolutely. So thank you to all of you.
So I'm just going to close with this. For me, it matters Italian Wine Podcast because it's perfectly imperfect in a way. Right. So that is it for our 2,500th episode. It's hard to believe. There's one thing we've learned along the way is that perfection isn't the goal, especially for us. But I think that's what makes it real. And, Italian Wine Podcast isn't about polishing the story, if you will. It's about telling it, and with all of its accents, especially with heavy Italian native accents, laughter, and sometimes awkward pauses in between, right? And I think that's okay too. I know people are, especially the new generation, they're very uncomfortable with pauses, but I think that is also the imperfect aspect of what Italian Wine Podcast is. So thank you all for joining us today. And what can I say for the next 2,500 episode?
Yeah, Chin with wine people.
Chin.
And you to Italian wine people. Ciao ragazzi.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Chin.
Listen to the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Himalaya FM, and more. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the show. If you enjoy listening, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. Any amount helps cover equipment, production, and publication costs. Until next time, chin chin.